welcome back. My name is Delmico L. Cunningham, better known as Dr. Media. So in our last video we were talking about this VR craze, this VR app we were making and setting up our topology as well as our scene based off of an image. So this is the image that I chose, which is Miss NASA. I believe this is 1950 something or another, but this is the image that I was using. So here inside of Photoshop, you can see how I've broken this up. I've actually broken up the woman onto a separate layer, the door itself, the capsule, the stairs are on a separate layer, and then I have my background layer. And then this is the full composite of what the original image looked like. So what I did was I basically broke that image up into separate pieces. So I had to recreate a floor in here. I recreated a lot of the bricks. Now, I really probably should have continued to create bricks and just do it all the way down to the floor, but just for the sake of getting this video out in time, I wanted to go ahead and kind of get this out. Same thing for the stairs. I have the stairs broken out into a separate piece at this point. And then, like I say, the capsule and everything else. So all the pieces are broken up. What I also did was I made alpha channels for each one of these. So if I go in here and turn off my gray and click on this, you can see there's an alpha channel. To make an alpha channel is actually pretty simple. So all I wanted to do is make sure I don't have the gray showing. So all I wanted to do is just hold down control and click on one of my regular layers. So I click on one of my regular layers, and then over here in my channels options, I'm going to go here and I'm going to say I want to create a new channel. And whenever you create new channels inside of Photoshop, it's going to create an alpha channel. Because for your images, either you're going to have a grayscale image, which is going to be one channel, which is gray, or you might have an RGB image, which would end up being a red, green, and blue composite. But since I'm using a gray, every other channel that I make ends up being an alpha channel. So the only thing I did with this alpha channel, I've got a brand new alpha channel in here. I have nothing, I just have my selection from my actual, I have my selection from my woman character in here. And all I'm going to do is just come in here and just fill this with white. So for an alpha channel to work, the way that works is white are the things that are opaque. And anything with black mask or gray will show up as a percentage of transparent, or if you have completely black, it will be 100% transparent. So if I were to take this and put this onto a card inside of 3D Studio Max, basically I would have a cutout silhouette of the woman. And that's exactly what I want, because I want to be able to have alpha channels for each one of these. So I'm going to delete that alpha channel because I'm not going to use it. I already have these channels broken out to the way that I want them. So, and you can name them whatever. I just named them alpha. I really guess I don't even have to have alpha on the name because they are alpha channels and they can't be anything else but an alpha channel. They're basically just alpha. So I'll get rid of that so it's not confusing. So if I click on gray and uncheck, or turn visibility off, you can see that they're there. All my channels are broken out, and this is great. And I'm going to make sure I name this right there. So all that stuff is done. I'm just going to come here and save this really quick. And I've got this saved, and let's go on over here to 3D Studio Max. So here inside of Max, I've got my scene, and everything is already inside of my scene. I have already matched, so if you saw my previous video, you saw me match my actual image to the perspective of my world, and those things now match up. So what I want to do in this video is actually start doing camera mapping and map the images onto these 3D objects that I've created in my scene. Now I have not done a 3D object for the woman yet, but I do, as you can see here, I have a box for my stairs, I have a kind of a plane for the background, I've got the door of my capsule, there's a bottom ring of the capsule here. So all these pieces right here are already broken out. So that part is actually working exactly the way that I want it, and everything is good. So let's be able to I want to be able to do some projection onto these objects. Now, a really quick way to get your UVs and to get your camera mapping and everything to work is I'm going to do this. So for this piece of geometry, I'm going to go to my modifier list. I'm going to go down here to camera map, and I'm going to say pick camera, and I'm going to choose that camera 001 because that's the camera that we're looking at right here. This is our shot cam. And we don't want to move this camera. Once we've done the camera matching on it, we do not want to move this camera anymore because it would throw off our perspective of our objects that are being modeled. So we don't want to move this guy anymore. And I can look at this and see I probably want to scale this maybe a little bit. So let's come in here and maybe scale this up some, right about there. So that's good. So scale that up a little bit more. And the reason why that camera map modifier is so important, if I go in here and I drop, let me just say I put a unwrap UVW. So I go unwrap UVW, and let's go here to our edit UVs and open up our UV editor. What you'll notice is that the camera map modifier actually maps out our UVs. The UVs are based off of how the camera sees that particular piece of 3D geometry, and in turn that gives me a set of UVs. So this is kind of how I'm cheating. So I don't have to actually unwrap this because I'm using the camera and I'm using the image to have a specific angle. I can actually use the camera's projection onto that object and then let that be my unwrapping. So by putting the camera map on here, it's actually unwrapped. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say collapse to, and it's going to give me a warning. I'm just going to say yes. Don't do hold slash yes, just do yes. And I can do the same thing for everything else. So I'll come in here and select this guy, go get my camera map, and then choose my camera. So basically I've done a really quick and dirty kind of unwrapping, and I can look back in here. Let's put another unwrap UVW on this and then open up UV editor, and you see that has actually been mapped the way that the camera currently sees it. So I'm just going to right click and say collapse to, say yes. Let's do the same thing for my capsule. So camera map, and I can check it again. You can always check it by just going here and adding an unwrap UVW modifier and just open up your UV editor. When you open your UV editor, you should see that object or those objects from that perspective that the camera actually had them at. So that's good. And let's delete this and make sure I pick the camera. So let's go back and look at that again. So I picked that camera. Let's go back and look at it again and open UV editor, and we should see now you can see that this actually has the projection of how my camera is seeing the object, because before I didn't have my camera map turned on. So by not having my camera attached to the camera map modifier, it doesn't project UVs. When you actually activate that camera, it projects UVs. So I can see when I pick this camera, that's what makes the UVs project the way that they are being shown from the camera's field of view. So once that's done, I'm going to right click and say collapse to. So that's been unwrapped. So this is actually a quick way to unwrap. It only works if you're using, well, I won't say it only works, but the best use scenario of this is basically doing what we're doing with this, where we're using an image to model things from and then mapping to. This is kind of the best case scenario for this. So I've picked my camera for this. Let's go in here and look at our unwrap and see what that has done. Unwrap UVW, open UV editor. Once you get into a groove of using this, you'll realize you don't need to check it, because you'll know once you've chosen the camera for the camera map, it is there. That's pretty much it. That's all you have to do. And I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say collapse to. And when you collapse it, it basically saves the UVs. If I go back in here and add another unwrap UVW and go open up the editor, you'll see that those UVs are actually saved. Because once you have unwrapped an object, unless you just destroy the UV set or delete the UV set, they're a part of the model. So it's nothing special you have to do to get them to be part of the model. They just are that way. So I'm going to grab all of these guys at one time, because they're all kind of facing the camera in the same direction. And I'm just going to say camera map, pick camera, and then pick my camera right there. They've all been kind of unwrapped. So I can click on each one of these and then right click and say collapse to and say yes. And then this guy right here, do the same thing. Right click, collapse to, yes. And then the same thing for this guy right here. Right click, collapse to, and yes. So now my scene pretty much is unwrapped. So let's talk about how we can get our textures to actually be on our models, because this is important, right? We want to be able to have these textures, because right now they're just grayscale, they're just gray box models. So I'm going to open up my material editor. I can hit the M key. The M key will open up my slate material editor. So inside of my material editor, I want to start making some of my shaders actually. So I can do this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in here, and in my slate material editor, right here underneath maps, I can see there's standard, and I'm going to go bitmap. So I'm going to drag out a bitmap. Just left mouse click and drag it out, and it's already going to my folder where my other objects are saved at. I'm just going to click on that PSD. And when I use a PSD, you'll see it'll ask me, do I want to use the collapse layers or do I want to use individual layers? I'm going to say individual layers, so I can choose my door and say OK. Grab another bitmap, grab my PSD again, and say individual layers. And then let's see, door. I get my capsule. Let's do it again. Same thing, individual layers. Get the stairs, and then let's do this again, and choose my PSD, individual layers, and then the last one I want to get is my background, and say OK. So what I want to do is I want to rename these. So I'm going to double click on this and rename it, and so this is going to be door TXT. I'm just using TXT as a prefix or as a just something to designate that these are textures. So that's all. So this is going to be capsule. It's a suffix rather. I was thinking about. So let's come in here, and this is going to be stairs, and my suffix is going to be TXT still. And this is going to be background. Alright, so I've got all those in there and they're good. So now that I've got all of my textures, because these are textures, and we need to start talking about these things in an order that makes sense, because these two-dimensional images are textures. When you put them into a group like this material right here, your material is realistically a shader. This material or this shader gives certain objects and certain things their properties that you would expect. So it, give it a metallic look, it'll give it specularity. So remember, the 2D images are your textures. These are textures here. So these are textures, and then you take a texture and put it into a material, or you can also use shader as an alternative to saying material. So let's start linking this stuff up. So the way I want to link this up is I want to make some actual shaders. So I'm just going to drag out like 4 shaders. And this is the original. That's what's on everything right now. So remember, the thing that's kind of weird about Max is that when you click on it, you haven't selected that item. You've just moved it. You have to double click on it to actually go to that node. So I'm going to call this door shader, and double click on this one. This is going to be capsule shader, and I'm only doing this so I can keep myself organized. And this is going to be stairs shader and background. Shader. So everything is good right there. So this is the part that makes kind of it all work and all come together. So I'm going to get my capsule. I'm going to actually connect. Let's move some of this stuff down. Let's get these guys up. And let's move some of this down so I can have these kind of going down to their respective